All right. Well, I will be. I'll be completely honest. I'm not sure I'm ready. The power may go out here in a second. I'm not sure. I had to wait for a delivery truck, and the delivery truck. I can hear the truck drive away, but we have a power line that goes across our driveway. So if they hit that power line, then this stream will end very quickly. But thank you for hanging in there. Thank you for hanging in there while I began at an awkward moment. So we're gonna recap some things, as we tend to do on the live streams. There's always a bit more to be said when you, I guess, engage in some of these topics. I always felt like I was maybe putting in too much. It was like I couldn't get a video out because I kept thinking, oh, I need to say that, I need to say that, I need to say that. So this is a way for us to recap. This one will actually be a little bit more forward looking. We'll look into the future of the channel and some things that I am working on. So give me one more second while I turn off my air conditioner. All right. Well, thank you again for hanging in there. Why did YouTube not like this video? So here's funny. So this was a clip of our last week's live stream. And it did really well. Like, the back end analytics of this video has one of the highest click through rates of any video that I've made. It has a decent retention rate. I got a lot of comments on it. And yet YouTube just does not want to push this one out. So I don't know why. I don't know why YouTube hates this video. But if you want to go back to last week's live stream and check out it's about the middle 30 minutes of that live stream where I put just the clips together. So there you can do that. I do believe the world is around, so pseudo history. We can agree on that at the very least. The world is round. Now, is it flat? Maybe. Free education. It seems like education in a lot of ways is free. I do think that the skepticism in various areas of society today, politics, medicine, I think the university will be the next one to be hit hard by that. But even if, what else could we agree on? Just checking in. Good to see you, Lynn. Good to see you. Thanks for checking in on us. Smash that like button if you want. It's good to see you. So, yeah, I really don't know what is happening on the JRE Fringe Views and Online Psychopaths. Jordan Peterson. I'm about to debut a short. I have not released this short. You guys can tell me what you think about it. But Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson got together, started talking about how do you trust the people online. It felt like Jordan was doing a little bit of a mop up from the Douglas Murray video, which is why I began that clip with the Douglas Murray. And Jordan says a few interesting things. Now, I think largely I agree with Jordan Peterson in this. There are people who are going to try to manipulate the podcast world, the YouTube world, the internet world, whatever. But I think Jordan makes the same mistake that Douglas Murray makes, which is he doesn't trust that people are smart enough to filter truth for themselves. And I don't know, maybe that has to do with Jordan being an academic and, thinking just sort of like by and large people are stupid. Douglas Murray seemed to think that, but I don't think Joe Rogan thinks that. I don't think that. I think people are largely smart, and I think we can use the tools that are in front of us to filter those fringe encounters. And this is what happened. when I posted the video, I'll go like this, and I'll try to make this maybe a wee bit bigger for y'all. When I posted the video, sorry, there's two of me, and that's kind of spooky. We don't really want that. Does that work? We'll go with that. I had this idea in my mind. Plato wrote dialogues for the same reason Joe Rogan has a podcast. People are curious about truth, and they desire new ideas to examine. Now, this actually came from, this is the, we're doing the Fringe encounters. Do I not have Parker? There we go. This actually came from a conversation I had with Parker Brown. TBD, I think it will come out on his channel here in a while, so you can follow Parker. But Jew Psychology mentioned this. Maybe the reason we like podcasts has something to do with why Plato almost exclusively wrote in dialogue. Now, this was before I posted this, so Drew, we're thinking along the same lines here. Plato wrote dialogue to give people a bird's eye view of a conversation. That's what a podcast is. We sit in a bird's eye view over Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson. We are not having to attend to the conversation the way Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson have to attend to each other. We can attend in something of a more objective way, just as you would reading Plato's dialogues. So Plato's writing these sort of dialogues of Socrates, kind of anticipating how we would eventually use podcasting. And I find that to be fascinating. So that just sort of popped out of the conversation that I was having with Parker Brown. So I talked about Parker Brown about this, and so he says stay tuned, and then he says part 2 of the convo needs to happen. So we sort of soft launched that episode. So Parker, I hope it's okay that I mention it here. Check out Parker Brown and the work that he does. Here's his channel on X, and you can check out that conversation when it comes out. Now back to Annie Crawford. If you notice the thumbnail, now back to this post where Annie Crawford jumps in. That's the thumbnail. I got a little Joe Rogan and Annie Crawford crossover here for you. What is happening on JRE and other good podcasts has actually been happening for thousands of years. So this, again, sort of a nod to the dialogue, the sort of form that Plato was writing. So Annie Crawford, I felt like this was one of those natural internet reactions of like, have you read Plato? When you hear someone talk about something you're familiar with, which Annie is, but in a way that you're not maybe familiar with it, you're like, are we even speaking the same language? And so, initially I was like, oh, geez, I touched a nerve here. In fact, I think I've covered some of Annie Crawford's commentary on X before this. So this might even be the second time Annie's ideas and thoughts make an appearance. Maybe I'll have to find some clips of her work on YouTube and bring that into the dialogue. But have you read Plato? He's not a Democrat or a populist. And so that's what I think, this is not what I was leaning on. He didn't think most people should be engaging in dialectic because they weren't virtuous enough. And I will have to reread The Republic maybe, and maybe I should ask Annie specifically for a reference for this. But I do see that, right? You do see that a little bit in Plato. I could even think of, Socrates mentions like the myth of the metals, these people with golden souls, silver souls, and bronze souls. But he introduces that idea as a noble lie. So and I don't think that's what Annie is talking about, but that's what popped into my head. So Socrates introduces this idea that he doesn't even really believe in. And so it's really interesting trying to interpret dialogues because they seem to at one point allow you to form whatever maybe belief that you want. But because you could always say, well, Plato is writing that Socrates said this thing, but why is Plato writing it that way? Why is Socrates saying it that way? Who do you actually analyze? The author writing the dialogue or the actual dialogue itself? And I think you end up doing both. But yes, so virtue is required to engage in the dialectic. What do you think about that? Virtue is required to engage, or they weren't virtuous enough, so we shouldn't allow them to come and do this philosophy. I mean, is that in a way what Douglas Murray was saying? These people are not experts. They should not talk. Now, Annie does clarify this. She's not talking about censorship, but I just wanted to sort of break this down. Plato and good podcasters use dialogue to filter truth. That's what I was trying to bring to people's attention. I'm not making a statement about whether they are Democrat or populist, but rather how do they treat ideas? And I see the same curiosity in Joe Rogan as I see in Socrates in The Republic. So I quote this. This is the opening line of The Republic from Socrates. And so shout out to Alan Bloom. His translation of The Republic, I think, is really great. He gives you a lot of notes, and he really does help you guide. He really does guide you through the Republic. I went down yesterday to the Piraeus with Glaucon, the son of Ariston, that I might offer up my prayers to the goddess. Now, of course, he's a philosopher. So Socrates, what does Socrates mean when he says, I will offer up my prayers to the goddess? He doesn't really believe in prayer or the goddess. But also because I wanted to see what manner they would celebrate the festival. So he's curious. He wants to see the festival. Why do people do stuff like this? And he does say, which was a new thing. So he's curious about the new thing. The philosopher descends into the realm of the religious people, not because and I said this, the philosopher who does not believe in the goddess descends to participate and understand new ideas. He is not an acolyte, but he is curious. And that's that level of curiosity is, I think, what makes something like Joe Rogan's podcast powerful. I mean, is that even but it's meaningful, or people find meaning in it. It's the curiosity of the person hosting the dialogue. And so here you have Socrates, the philosopher, curious about what these religious people are doing. Plato writes him in as a character, almost in a play. He descends down to the Piraeus. He's with a rich young man of Athens, Glaucon, son of Ariston. So he has influence in the realm of the emerging generation of rich young rulers. Here's this old philosopher, Socrates. He's not terribly attractive, and yet what is attractive to these young men is his ability to handle ideas. And that's, I think, why good podcasting is good and why good philosophy is good. You sort of pick up the idea and you examine it, and you know that in examining the idea, you're not necessarily taking that idea on as your own. You're still examining it. And so I give a shout out to Warren Gage, who was my professor at Knox Theological Seminary, where I studied classics through Warren Gage. Warren Gage is a very interesting person. I would love to have him on the podcast. I reached out to him at one point via email. Fascinating person. I think he has a PhD. I think he has a JD. I think he has what else does he have? He's got the law degree. And he studied under Louise Cowan, who is a fascinating literary critic, I guess you could say, is maybe what she was. But her stuff on Dante was just really good. You can actually get it. You can get the audio copies of Louise Cowan's lectures on the University of Dallas website. I believe I can look up that, and I might be able to put that in the description after the fact. So thank you for hanging in there. I do see the chat. I'll catch up on chat here in a second. I just wanted to sort of set the context for the video. So Dr. Gage, also Louis Marcos, Lou Marcos. I had him on the channel, so if you want to look up, is it KOS Marcos? If you want to look up the video that I did with Louis Marcos, Finding Jesus in Stranger Themes, we do talk about this. We talk about essentially the providential ordering of human history, even within the pagan world of someone like Socrates, that led them to prepare a fertile ground for the gospel to emerge in the Hellenistic world. And so I really appreciated Annie Crawford engaging with this conversation. I am no, she says, I am no Joe Rogan hater, but it's very important to realize that there is no essential virtue in mere dialogue. Okay, I thought that was a really, okay, and I don't know if I 100% agree. I like the context here, but again, I'm approaching this as a Christian, as a person who believes that God spoke this world into existence. So there is something in the mere dialogue itself. But again, I appreciate Annie kind of pulling me off the ledge here and getting me to rethink my assumptions here. As Socrates and Plato knew quite well, dialogue is as much a way to deceive and confuse as it is a way to unearth the truth. But again, going back to the virtue of the dialogue, do you need virtue? Is it not true that the deceiver, the Satan, doesn't want to engage in dialogue, but only wants to deceive and lead people? There's something to that. Not engaging in the dialectic, but simply trying to undermine the message that has already been spoken with not the right kind of skepticism, but just a type of criticism. Did God really say? Did God really say? You know, that's not really engaging in the dialogue. But I do think there's something there. Dialectic is a highly skilled activity. You will notice in all the Platonic dialogue, Socrates is controlling the conversation and guiding it to a point. It's not all just free, open exploration and inquiry. And I agree. There's an interesting point here that I think probably someone like Lou Marcos would say, and I would say this, so I don't want to put words in Dr. Marcos's mouth, but having read his book, From Socrates to Christ, I believe is what it's called. Socrates is controlling the conversation, but who is controlling Socrates? We don't live in a closed system. We live in a system that is being influenced by the Spirit of God, and we live in a world that is guided by the providential hand of God. So who is inspiring Plato to write these dialogues and write Socrates in this way? Yes, Socrates is controlling the conversation and guiding it to a point, but isn't there a master chess player? Right? Who's even beyond the Socrates? Socrates controls the conversation, but who is influencing Socrates? Who is in control of Socrates? Well, in that sense, Plato, the author, is, but then who is inspiring Plato? And I would say in a world where there is common grace, where even pagan philosophers can understand something true, just like secular songwriters or secular authors can really touch on themes of redemption, let's say, a Socrates, a Plato, can very much explore those same ideas because we live in God's world. Socrates is not going down to the Piraeus with curiosity to learn from his interlocutors. He knows he has nothing. They have nothing to teach him. I read it differently. And Annie's probably way smarter than me on this, but I will say I do read it differently. I think Plato writes that Socrates goes down to the Piraeus because ultimately he does see the philosophy as the higher form, but I don't think that means he knows they have nothing to teach him. I think that is why he speaks to the youth. I'm not advocating for censorship here, but we are foolish to confuse skilled philosophical dialectic with open internet conversation. And I there is truth to that for sure, but I hope that we can get better at it. And so thank you for the feedback. My optimism about dialogue comes from my trust in the providence of God and not the virtue of the individual. As I just said, God created the world with words. He created humanity with words. He commissioned us to be stewards of the message. While I agree that dialectic is a highly skilled activity worth developing, I also believe meaningful dialogue is possible because it is how we are designed. I see evidence of this in Plato's dialogues, my conversation with my 6-year-old, and Joe Rogan's podcast. And that's why someone like Douglas Murray just doesn't get it, right? His appeal to authority fell flat because we live, I mean, first of all, I do think we live in a world where I can learn something from my kids, right? Out of the mouth of babes comes the truth, right? So there is an innocence and there is a truth that comes out of these young people who haven't developed the skill, right? Dialectic is a highly skilled activity. And yet you can still learn from a child, can't we? So, and again, I appreciated Annie engaging on this topic. And sometimes I do this because sometimes in the text thread, it's like I can kind of get what I'm saying, but wholeheartedly agree. I don't think we're far apart in our views. And so, again, shout out to the internet dialogue where it's like, if you go back, like Annie's initial approach was like, have you even read Plato? Like, your ideas are so far off from my own. And yet, okay, actually, maybe we're not that far apart on our views. And so I think that's a testament to the fact that maybe we can do this well. But in our cultural discourse, we tend to idolize the power of free speech a wee bit much. It's necessary, but it is not sufficient. The heart of man is desperately wicked and deceitful above all else. Where our words are many, error is inevitable. Proverbs 10:19. Wow. Where words are many, error is inevitable, as is evident from me trying to even read that thing. Where hostility pursued, words will lead us to truth. But I think you give men in general too much credit for genuinely seeking the truth. We need to give them a chance, even at great cost, but remain realistic and sober and wise. And I agree. So shout out to Annie Crawford. I don't think she has a YouTube channel. I think she has a Substack or something like that, but often will appear in these types of conversations. And so, awesome. I know that I know nothing, St. Schultz. Yeah, I know that the more that I learn, I mean, Augustine kind of dealt with something like that, right? It's like the more I learn, the more I know, the more I understand how much I don't know. Unknown unknowns might fit in that box too. Unknown unknowns. Hey, Neutrino, how's it going? Good to see you. I feel like I haven't seen you in a while. American Steve, you have a Joe Rogan picture in every one of your videos. Haha, clout, come on. Yeah, are we clout chasing? Are we? So Mike Benz did a thing, and maybe I'll do something on the Mike Benz clout chasing of Joe Rogan. And feel free to give me your feedback if you feel like I'm one of those people. I do try to study what Joe Rogan is doing, even if Joe Rogan is sort of not doing it intentionally. But Matt C sent me something. Matt C sent me. Nope. Anyway, Mike Benz pointed this out. I thought it was a hilarious video. Yeah, there it is. Give me, and I don't think I probably won't go full into this, but yeah, to American Steve's point. I mean, keep me accountable. I like Joe Rogan's podcast. I think it's interesting. I like the guests that he has on. I think something is happening in the area of podcasting, and I think Joe Rogan's podcast is one of the places where you can see it the most clearly because it's the biggest. And so if that makes me a clout chaser or whatever, fine, I guess. I kind of think that Socrates was Plato's imaginary friend. I love the Republic, but I haven't read it yet. You guys are hilarious. If it's about education, I have a diploma in script writing for film and TV. Yes. Well done. Socrates. Plato is down with oligarchy, correct? Yeah. Okay. So here's what's funny. I did, and again, shout out to Annie Crawford. And I'll probably post this on X if you don't follow me. Um, but yeah, I mean, I went back into the Republic, and one of the first passages that I reread was kind of on that, right? I mean, he's essentially advocating for a virtuous king. He's sort of advocating for a king philosopher, right? The idea that the philosopher would be the one who could be the right king, but of course the philosopher would never want to become the king. And it's really interesting. And again, I haven't developed this fully, but if you think about what Plato and Socrates are dealing with, like the philosopher is the one who brings you into proximity to the divine logos. Let's say maybe not divine, but the logos, right? The priest would be someone who brought you into proximity to God or the gods. And so the philosopher in that way, though in maybe a sort of an atheistic way, is doing the role of a priest. And so Socrates is advocating for this philosopher king that's not that far off from the idea of a priest who is a king. And of course, Christ comes as the priest king from the order of Melchizedek, which would be just so fun to do on this podcast, and I just haven't done it. Sorry, I'm totally doxing my not doxing, but I'm sharing my messages. Sorry guys, sorry about that. Such is life. I'm sure we're fine. Sorry, Matt. Yeah, whatever. Okay. No, nobody's like sharing bank account numbers or anything like that. Um, Sorry. And Scott, you're on there too. Sorry, man. Sorry. I failed you guys. I'm sorry. Okay, let's make sure it closes and then I'll show you. Yeah, so that's the Mike Benz. I might do something with that, but that's on the clout chasing of Joe Rogan. Whoops, I don't want to open that. Please close. All right, so let's move on. Hopefully that's enough of kind of catching up on the chat. You don't need an image to be heard. You might get more views, but change it. Yeah, and that's true. I mean, American Steve, you don't need his image to be heard. You might get more views, but it changes nothing. Yeah, and honestly, I am kind of going, look at all these, I have a lot of tabs open, and one of the things that I hope to talk about in the coming weeks is just the future of this channel. And recently I have just done a ton of Joe Rogan, but that is not necessarily where the podcast, like it was about, I would say maybe 50% Joe Rogan, 25% Jordan Peterson, and then I would throw a little bit of Russel Brand in there when I first started this podcast. Those were the three voices. I wanted to try to simplify what I was doing on this podcast, and those were the three voices that I was listening to. And recently, you're right. I mean, it just has been a lot of Joe Rogan because I've been honestly, I've just been too busy to do some of the other stuff. I mean, it's kind of but the time will come. I appreciate your feedback, American Steve. And you are right. You might get more views, but you don't need the image. Ben says, interesting info, but is an intelligence asset that makes me skeptical. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for that. Thank you. Scott said it. I didn't. I trust the CIA. Everybody's somebody's asset, I assume. Pete, your next thumbnail needs to be as many Joe Rogans as you can fit. Just a bunch of Joe Rogans going. And maybe I'll throw like my own face in there. Yeah, so there you go. Hey, okay. If you look, we can count it up. So there's no Joe Rogan face in this thumbnail. There is a Joe Rogan logo. And then I have my sermon on why Jesus teaches in parables. And then speaking of Matt C, I have my conversation with Matt C. And then, although this is covering the Joe Rogan podcast, there's no Joe Rogan there. And then I have Why the Blind See Jesus. I'm sort of calling out apostate prophet here. And then you have Grim Grizz. Shout out to Grim Grizz. This video is called something about Fringe encounters, isn't it? So that's why that comes from Grim Grizz. What did I title this? I got thrown off. I got thrown off by the delivery. friends, fringe encounters, and where we go from here. So hopefully we get to the where we go from here. So shout out to Annie Crawford. That's the first friend we highlight. We have highlighted a little bit of Matt C. So there he is again. Grim Grizz is another friend that we can highlight. You can check out these videos. I have a playlist called TLC. Where is it? Where's my TLC? This little corner conversations. They should be there. They should both be in there. Okay, fine. Delete the whatever. You guys get the idea. Okay, so moving on. There's Grim Grizz. Shout out to Grim Grizz. Thanks for the title. Sword in the Staff. Another friend. Released a podcast of our conversation. You can find that right here. Shout out to Sword and Staff Multiverse channel. That fine young gentleman's name is Coleman, and we met through the Dead Men Walking podcast bracket, which I think is a fun way to play on the internet. I don't know how much play they're doing intentionally, but if you listen to the Joe Rogan Jordan Peterson podcast, Jordan Peterson talks about how play is a sign that you are not tyrannical. If you can play a game, then your soul, it's a good sign that your soul is not a tyrannical soul, which is so funny because eventually he outs himself as sort of being a Pharisee. But we'll get to that clip here in a second. The reason is this. The Joker invites the king, the court jester, invites the king in to play on the trick, the game, the joke. And if the king can laugh at himself and become foolish for a second, then then the kingdom is safe because there's no tyrant, right? But if the jester loses his head, now everybody in the kingdom knows that there is a tyrant on the loose, that the king is actually a tyrant, and we need to take this very seriously. So the Joker and the king play a very serious game. And the Dead Men Walking podcast bracket, I thought was a fun way to play. Use a bracket and introduce people to a podcast. I covered it in a live stream a few months ago, but anyway, shout out to Sword and Staff Multiverse, and again, you can check that out. I sent the link there. We already kind of highlighted Parker Brown, but yeah, that video, my conversation with Parker should come out at some point, and when it does, I will let you know. So shout out to Parker. I think I left a link already for that, but if not, I will put it in the description of this video. Man, I think I set the record for comments on that Peterson video. Was that the JRE Peterson video, or was that here on this channel? I'll have to go read. If it's on the JRE one, I'll have to go read through them. I would love to. Let's see. Can we find our friend Scott on here? I wish you could search. Maybe give me a keyword. If you give me a keyword, I could search for one of your comments and see. And then we'll upvote it. We'll just upvote. We'll upvote Scott's comments on this one. Okay, so those are the friends and the fringe encounters, Joe Rogan Experience. That last one. This one, yeah. Well, actually, you know what I could do? I can just search. Is it from this account? Clay. They're hiding your comments. I don't see it. Okay. The joke. Okay. Are you guys ready for this? I just talked about the Joker and the court jester, or the king and the court jester. Let me know what you think about this. So, in the Joe Rogan conversation, I can tell I already need to make an adjustment. I need to zoom in a little bit. But in the Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson conversation, he talks about the Pharisees wearing religious clothes. But then Jordan Peterson went on an interview with Jesse Waters. And this happened.
Pharisees who want to dress in religious clothing and obtain status and consequence, and they claim the beliefs, but really all they're after is attention.
What's that on your jacket?
Oh, this is Christian iconography. Pharisees who want to dress in religious clothing and obtain status and consequence, and they claim...
Did you catch it? They claim...
And they claim the beliefs, but really all they're after is attention.
They claim the beliefs, but really all they're... Is that what Jordan Peterson is doing? Is that what he has been doing for a while now? You let me know. Again, I haven't released that one. I released one that was similar to that, but I think it was just too long and people didn't stick around for the punchline. Let's see. I can find it though. So there is one that's similar to that is live. It's right here. And okay.
They're the people who use God's name in vain as they proclaim moral virtue. They invade the idea space, and then they use those ideas as false weapons to advance their narcissistic advantage. There's all sorts of narcissistic players who are claiming right-wing and religious affiliation. Now, wherever there's power concentrated, you can expect the psychopathic narcissist types to migrate, and then they claim the beliefs, but really all they're after is attention.
What's that on your jacket?
Oh, this is Christian iconography. They're the people who use God's name in vain.
There you go. Peterson gets me riled. I think it's because I know he's light years smarter than I, and I just don't understand how he doesn't see himself as a hypocrite. The Jungian trad shift, yeah. What's the deal? Well, and again, I originally thought that this last Peterson Joe Rogan was really good. I thought Jordan Peterson approached the podcast with a better attitude than his last one, and yet it does feel like at times he's trying to mop up and sort of bring the conversation back to sort of the side of Douglas Murray. He was polite to Dave Smith, but I think ultimately there was just this subtle thing of like there's these narcissists and psychopaths on the right. They're borrowing religious language, they're doing all this, but they're really sort of wolves in sheep's clothing, which is so ironic because people have tried to push Jordan Peterson to say, well, what do you really believe about Jesus? What do you really believe about God? And he's, and it's fine if you don't want to talk about it. I can respect that, but then you criticize other people for borrowing the beliefs and using clout, using those for attention. And I think ultimately he's doing a good thing. Like, I think ultimately Jordan Peterson is doing a good thing because it gets people to think about the Bible. So, and the Bible has this idea, like, whether for good, for ill, if the gospel is being preached, for thou art rejoice. What you determine for evil, God uses for good. So people might even be trying to gain attention using the name of Jesus. But, if that's the case of Jordan Peterson, I don't know. But ultimately, I think millions of people have started to investigate the Bible because of the work of Jordan Peterson. And we'll just see. I just thought it was really ironic. I mean, I couldn't unsee it. Once he said the Pharisees dress in this religious garb, but they don't really believe what they're saying. And I, Jordan Peterson, dress with like religious iconography on my, and this was the last, I need to get to this video. That's a good one. Okay. This will go this way. I don't think I'll get to this. The last Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson experience, the first thing they talked about was his jacket. His jacket it's a stained glass, it's filled with religious symbolism. It's filled with religious, it is a, am I muted or there's worse than PR out there for the Bible? There's worse PR out there that's right. Yeah, it could be worse, right? It could be worse. And so anyway, it's like, okay, you're criticizing the Pharisees for wearing religious garb, but not really they're not really being true to the religion. They're just borrowing the ideas and using it for their own, narcissistic whims. Okay, what has Jordan Peterson been doing for years? I mean, I'm not trying to say he's a narcissist, but he's been basically doing that. So, okay, Neutrino, I'm glad you're back. Thanks for the update. Okay, so where do we go from here? Friends, fringe encounters, and where we go from here. So just to re-emphasize this, the fringe encounters, that's a shout out to Grim Grizz, but it was also interesting that Sword and Staff used that same, right? When fringe kids find each other at the Real Daily Wire podcast, Best Reformed Podcast bracket, and do a collab, you get Sword and Staff and Strange Theology. Shout out to Patrick Cigars as well. So Fringe, that's where the Fringe comes from. We had some Fringe encounters. We had friends, Fringe encounters, and where we go from here. This episode was fantastic. It is fantastic. I'm not all the way through it. But don't sleep on this one. It takes a while. It takes a minute to get there. Let me see if I can find this clip that I posted. It takes a minute to get there, but dang. I need to get to, Shovas asked me a question I never answered. Sorry, okay, hold on. Just bear with me. Wait. So I posted it right here. And this actually does get into my book. If I can get there. I posted a link to my book. It's called Love Like a Crucifix. I posted a link to it in the description of this video, into the description of this live stream. So you can check it out. But it actually deals with this theme. And the greatest act of, and this is the theme, the greatest act of love in human history, gosh, forgive me. I'll get my words straight. It's been a long week. The greatest act of love human history ever witnessed was also the single greatest moment of pain. Joe and Jeremy swim out into those deep waters. What do you guys think? I think
suffering doesn't have to be looked at as a negative thing. It could be looked at as a beautiful thing. It's where real love comes out of.
Yeah.
You know, all my suffering, there was real love in there. Everyone around me, just in this recovery, or in a loss I may have had from, there's real love in there.
With my suffering, there's real love in suffering. Suffering is universal to the human experience, right? And Jeremy, is it Renner? He's the guy that played Hawkeye in Marvel. He also did a movie called Hurt Locker, which blew my mind because I actually have a friend, a friend from many years ago. We've known each other for a really long time, who does that. So it's sort of like blew my mind. Jeremy Renner. In fact, shout out to Mark Walker. He actually was one of the guys that endorsed my book. So there you go. There's a cyclical nature to these things. He had an insanely traumatic episode where he was run over by like a snow cat, like these snow tanks that come and remove the snow, and it crushed him. I mean, it literally just crushed him almost to death. And he came out of that with this understanding that pain, not only is it universal, but it might be necessary. And when we spend all of our time trying to avoid pain, I actually talked about this with my students Sunday night in our youth meeting. The purpose of life is not human happiness. It's not our comfort. The purpose of life is to know and to worship God and enjoy Him forever. And I can come to a knowledge of God. I can worship God. I can enjoy God forever, even in the midst of pain, even in the midst of bad circumstances. And then once you invert, your perspective, you realize, oh, this pain, this trauma, it's being transformed into something that doesn't dismiss the pain, the trauma, and maybe even the evil that precipitated that trauma, but it's transforming it into something. I touched on that with the Blair White video. It's a long time ago, but the transformative nature of trauma in the hands of God is redeemed and transformed into something. I think the video is called When Anyway, it's on here somewhere. So that is, I think it was this one. Yeah, it was this one. Dan, I share a clip in this one. Let's just go there. I share a clip from Dan Allender, and Dan Allender was very influential with this in me understanding how to deal with my own pain. Oh, this was back when I was still I still hovered in the corner there. Sorry. It's annoying to have two of me, but Blair White talks about how being trans is probably a trauma response, and there's a desire for transformation. There's a desire for bodily transformation, which of course is the message, like in the gospel. And so Dan Allender comes, he wrote a book called The Healing Path, and the phrase that just stuck with me and has stuck with me from Dan Allender is, don't waste your pain. And when I read that, I remembered that moment with Thomas, where Jesus says, reach here and touch my hands. I'm so bad at remembering verses and stuff like that. John 20. And I think I've said this. I think I've probably talked about this on the podcast before. But Jesus keeps his scars. Reach here to my fingers. Reach here with your fingers. And see my hands. Reach here your hand and put it on my side. And do not be unbelieving, but believing. So Thomas is transformed from an unbelieving person to a believer, a believing person. And why? Because he sees that Jesus, his glorified heavenly body, still retains the scars from his crucifixion. Why? Well, because Jesus understood, well, Dan Allender is sort of helping us understand, I think, something that Jesus is showing us here. Don't waste your pain. It was for the joy set before him that he endured the cross. He's like, yeah, pain, yeah. Like he does say, if this cup can be, if there can be any other way, right? But not my will, your will be done. And for the joy set before him, he endures the cross. He was pleased. God was pleased, right, with the sacrificial love of Jesus. Like it was the love of Jesus that caused him to go to the cross. And I just felt like Joe and Jeremy were touching on that theme. That pain is universal. We all try to avoid it, but it doesn't have to be this negative, evil thing. I think in the hands of God, and they're not talking about it like this, but it can be transformed. It can be transformed. And they even talk about it a little bit, like the love that comes even in the midst of pain or through pain. Gosh, that is just deep stuff, man. That is like from the foundation, right? Even Adam and Eve, God clothes them with skins, right? What does he have to do? He has to sacrifice an animal to do that. So there's this gesture of sacrifice. The innocent needs to be sacrificed. And so when you go through pain, it can isolate you. It can make you very selfish. That's really one of the unfortunate things about pain. But I think it can also paint for you a picture of the love of God that we would never have seen if we hadn't endured that pain to begin with. So I will develop that more. There's like an 8-minute clip here that I want to pull, and I want to unpack it, because for about 8 minutes these guys just go into that theme. Of course, they're not talking about it from a strictly Christian perspective, but there is something of sort of the deep magic of the gospel that they touch on. So and that's one thing that my book will touch on. That's one thing that I deal with in my book. It is the theme of pain. It's not even that. It's love like a crucifix. what do we see in the cross? What are we looking at when we're looking at the cross? We're looking at the greatest moment of pain and the greatest act of love at the same time. It's the same. Pain doesn't do away with the love. The single greatest act of love. This is from the introduction of the book. I mean, I can show it to you. It's so glary when I get onto when you get onto these websites that are they don't have like they don't have like a dark mode. They don't have a dark theme. Like Amazon, get with it. Get with the dark theme. So here's my book. And so I'm just pulling from this. I'm pulling from the description, and then I'm pulling from the first few chapters. You guys can see that, right? I lost visual. See, it's just so bright for me. Ugh, sorry, guys. All right, hang in there. So it's called Love Like a Crucifix, and this is what I write in that. This is what I was writing on. God's love for us is similar. He often walks us straight toward pain in order to take us through it, not around it, in order that we might experience the transformation that makes us more like the Son. So, of course, Hebrews tells us that he learned obedience through the things that he suffered. Very strange thing, right, to be said about the Son of God, but that's what it says. So we are, and then it does say also that we are being transformed into his image. Love Like a Crucifix is a book that will challenge readers to live in the tension between the pain in life and the joy of love. It will help you understand how to live with contentment in moments of supreme joy as well as moments of total hardship. And I think that's true. I think it's, what is it? C.S. Lewis said he whispers in our joy and shouts in our suffering, right? That's the idea. It's not even that, like, okay, so pain is so powerful, then I should just look for and embrace pain. No, not really. You look for joy, but you also can take the pain and the hardship along the way. I think one of the disservices that we've done in our modern sort of preaching of the gospel is somehow we've given the impression that if you are going through hardship or pain, it's because like the sin in your life or God is, judging you. And it's like, it may be because of the sin in your life, but pain is just part of, it's part of the life of Christ. And we as Christians we follow him. And so we follow him through that pain or even similar pain. So there you go. I'll catch up on a little bit of chat here. Sorry, I'm sort of just like in my own world here. You know what, Scott, I'm guessing he and Joe at some point talk archery. I don't know if they ended up talking archery. I have about 45 minutes of the video to look. Peterson, I think this is Peterson's number 9 rule for life is to treat the person you are talking to like they have something to teach you. I guess that doesn't apply to comedians. Yeah. Jesus' suffering on the cross was the ultimate act of love, redeeming us and defeating death. Amen. Life is to worship God despite suffering. Yeah. And I think that's where people get all sideways, right? Not letting the world influence your worship. Yeah. Or the circumstances of life influence your worship. And that's one of the things that I developed in the book is pain will often have a way of shaping our view of God. And this is what we learn in the book of Job. But then when our view of God begins to shape our pain, that's when transformation can happen. That's when transformation does happen. I think there's an element of the meaning crisis with the loss of how to process suffering. Yeah, Neutrino, you're right there. Yeah, because we've lost the ability to process that suffering, because we've lost that sense of meaning, then we just avoid the suffering, right? We just at all costs try to eliminate suffering. They talked about painkillers in this episode, and that's kind of it. It's like, just numb it, numb. Just take the painkiller, whatever you can do to numb the pain. But what Jeremy actually talks about is not numbing the pain, but confronting it. Essentially, what he's talking about is confronting pain. That's what Jesus did. I mean, right? I say that fully. No, I don't believe Jeremy is a Christian. We too can find victory over life's struggles. Yep. And I think, no temptation is overtaking you except that which is common to man, but God is faithful. He's made a way. He has provided a way out so that you can stand up under. That word endure there, God has provided you a way out so that you can endure, means you're still going to go through it. You're going to stand up under this, but you're going to stand. You're not going to be crushed. That's the promise. The promise is not all the bad things go away. The promise is you will be able to endure the bad things, and you will be able to rejoice in the good things. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed, that word means happy. It means happy. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness. You're telling me all these people are happy? Yeah, that's essentially what it's like. Yeah, we can be happy despite these struggles. And so I'm going to continue to develop that theme a little bit more as we go. And the other theme, so that would be the theme of love, suffering. Love is universal, suffering is universal. Story. Now, one of the things that I posted, is it in here? Oh shoot, I think I reposted it. I'm getting tired. I'm sorry. Let's see. Was it a reply? It must have been a reply. Yeah, it sounds like finding himself inside a narrative was one of the ways Jeremy Renner overcame an enormous amount of trauma, and I find that encouraging. Finding himself, locating himself in a story was one of the things that allowed for healing to take place. I think that is a little bit of Allender. There's a little bit of Dan Allender in that statement, I think. And I've lost him, but I just have too many tabs open. Locating yourself in a story, realizing that you're part of a narrative, realizing that you're not an accident, and the trauma that you go through is not an accident. Now, with that, so that's the Jeremy Renner story. And he points that out. He points out that, writing the book was very hard, but he keeps using the word narrative, and I'd be interested to explore what he means by that more. I don't think he's using it in a Christian way, but I thought this Martin Shaw, Ian McGilchrist video was absolutely fascinating. And I just love that two people like Martin Shaw, who's here, and Ian McGilchrist, who's here, are willing to sit down, put on turn on a microphone, put on a webcam, and invite us into their conversation. Because I think it's going to heal people. I legitimately think that the work of Martin Shaw as a storyteller is it's restorative. There's something in our soul, like what Neutrino was saying about the meaning crisis. Our soul needs to be healed as much as our body, as much as our emotions, as much as our mind. And story is one of the ways that does it. Story has a way of preparing the soul. And so for a person like Jeremy, preparing the soul to recover from a near-death experience that essentially crushed his body. I think he said he broke 38 bones. His skull, his jaw was broken in 4 places because he was just crushed by this snowcat. And I mean, the thing weighs, I don't know how much, but I mean, he survived, which is a miracle. So shout out to miracles. And I want to explore this. This is why, going back to American Steve's comment earlier about there's just so much Joe Rogan going on. It's like, this would be, if I had more time, and I do this podcast part-time. I do this sort of this is my journal. This is my sort of online journal. Particularly live streams are like that for me. But it's a way for me to think through some of the things that I find very important. The nature of narrative and story is one of the things that I find very important. As a Christian, as a biblical student, as a student of the Bible, as a biblical theologian, if you will, I think the nature of narrative, there's Dan Allender, the nature of narrative is something that is very important. And I think it's something that we have lost. Even in the church, we've lost that sense of the narrative. And actually, if you want an example of that, I tried to deal with that in this parable. This, why does Jesus speak in parables? Jesus speaks in parables, I think, for a very different reason than Socrates talks in dialogue, or Plato writes dialogues. I'm trying to think of the last time I dealt with the nature of story, but it's here somewhere. And I think understanding, actually, is probably this one, Rick Strassman's video. I really liked this video. I don't have my book, The Prophetic Imagination, but I'm reading that, and I'm looking at the Gospel of John. I'm looking at teaching through the Gospel of John, and actually shout out to my guy, Dr. Warren Gage. He has a book on the Gospel of John. So anyway, it's just really good. So that will be the future, and I might do I may read a little bit more from my book here. Yeah, I'll take the last few minutes here, just read from the book, because I've wanted to do this, and I just haven't been able to sit down and do it. And I'm here now, and I think I've got 10 minutes or so left. And so let me read a little bit more of this, and I may clip it and just put it as a solo video somewhere on my channel. Let me get a little drink of water though. So thank you guys for hanging in there. If you're still hanging out in the chat, give me that thumbs up. I know I started the live stream and then didn't show up for 10 minutes. So thank you guys again for enduring that. I'm glad I didn't lose power. So, I never did shout out to Charlie Brown. That's the Charlie Brown mug. I don't think Charlie Brown has made it onto the live streams yet. I think Yosemite mug has made it. I think the Rabbit Room mug has made it. I think the Winnie the Pooh mug has made it. But I don't know about Charlie Brown, so we'll see. I have to go back and watch. Okay, so again, this is the introduction to my book called Love Like a Crucifix. We think we have God figured out, but we don't. And some of us are painfully aware of that fact. Others may be not so much. We think that what we've learned in Sunday school or from the seeker-friendly church is all there is to know about God, but I'm afraid it is not the whole story. It's not that the Sunday school teacher or the seeker-friendly pastor are wrong. It's just that our message is incomplete. The trend over the past few generations is to tell one part of the gospel without speaking of the whole gospel. We love to talk about the hope that God brings, but we don't want to talk about what it costs to follow Jesus to that hope. We love to talk about God loving us and forgiving our sins, and rightly so, because that's what makes the gospel good news. But we hesitate to challenge people to be accountable. We have been talking to the past generations about the life that comes from the gospel, but we have stopped short of talking about the death. Yeah, the death. You read a book like that. Not many people pick it up and buy it, but such is life. But again, I think we misunderstand the hope if we don't talk about the death. Hope of what? Freedom of what? Have a good night, Neutrino, if that's a peace out for me. We expect God to be a nice guy. I'll try that again. We expect God to be the nice guy we heard about in either the Sunday school or from the pulpit. And God is infinitely nice. In fact, he's more than nice. He is gracious and has forgiven us of our sins. But God is not just nice. God is fierce. God is jealous. God is awesome. He is beyond us. He is not tame. He refuses to accept the box that we try to put him in. This is the side of the gospel. This is the side of God that we find difficult. So we leave him be and ask no further questions. I want to tell you that I believe if we press on through and wrestle with the things about Christianity that are difficult, we actually arrive at an even more wonderful understanding of who God is. Gotcha. I'm glad you're still here, man. We do a disservice to our beliefs when we stop short of teaching the difficult things about Christianity. We think that by teaching about sin or suffering or reading the story of Job, we will turn people away from God. But what turns people away from God is that they have only heard about how great things are when you become a Christian. And so they become a Christian and things are not great. In fact, for most people, things get worse. So God must be a lie. But the truth is that God wants us, there's a typo. The truth is God wants us to be supremely content in Him, regardless of the trials that we may suffer. And to get us to that point in our lives, we have to go through some difficult times. I'm sorry that I have to say that. I wish I could tell you that you just come to Jesus and it all gets better, that you will not have any problem the rest of your life. But I can't say that. The truth is that we have to hold the gospel and the truth of who God is with both hands. In one hand, there is the infinite joy and freedom from sin and hell. That's awesome. And in the other hand, there is hardship and suffering. The tension of living a life that is content with both supreme joy and total hardship is really the story of this book. As I have told my students, there are certain things that you can only learn. There are certain things you can learn from reading them. Sorry, I'm getting a clicking and I don't know where it's coming from. Oh, it's my flashlight from when I went out to meet the trucks. As I've told my students, there are certain things you can learn from reading them in a book, and there are other things that can only be learned by going through life. I hope that in some way I can combine those two elements here in the chapters that follow. I've written some chapters as a memoir of my journey to belief in Jesus. The other chapters are taken from what I've learned from reading Scripture. But let me say this, what I have learned in Scripture helps me to understand what has happened in my life, not the other way around. In other words, I allow Scripture to interpret my experience. I do not let my experience interpret Scripture. I will explain more on that in the following chapters. In the next 2 chapters, we will be talking about the wilderness. Growing up wild is essentially a story of my childhood living in Yosemite National Park and how I made the journey from a life of doubt to belief in Jesus. How to Live in a Garden looks at the life of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and what we can learn about the character of God. The Mountain is about my time living in Hawaii, hiking, traveling, leading, and coming to believe in a thing called love. The Son of Abraham, and is an essay of the life and love of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and what we learn about God's love from the lives of these men. The Valley is the follow-up story to The Mountain and covers more of my life as a missionary in Hawaii and the struggle I had with feeling like God had abandoned and betrayed me. Brokenness follows the story of Job and is, as you may have guessed, a chapter on brokenness and what it means to depend on God. Becoming a Believer is a chapter that follows my personal story of abandoning my faith and then finding it again. Love, Like a Crucifix, is most likely the most important one as we look at the cross and what it teaches us about the love of God. Into the Wild is my story of coming home to California after years of missions work and some of the things in my own life that need to die. The Empty Tomb is about the resurrection and how God makes life out of death. Just as we cannot talk about all the great things in Christianity without also addressing the real struggle, we cannot talk about the cross of Christ without talking about the empty tomb. Jesus died, but he didn't stay dead. We also must go through a kind of death if we are to find true life. And that's John 12:25, which is my sort of life verse there. And so, yeah, that's the project. That was my book, and it's been hanging around for a little while, and I just haven't really had a great opportunity to share more about it. So, if you want to check it out, I will leave a link, and yeah, I think I'll wrap up the live stream here, but there was something else I wanted to say and I can't remember what it was. Um, I'm sure that's really fun to look at. I think I must have been. I was thinking about the Dark Night of the Soul. That my book kind of deals with that quite a bit, and you can look at a book called The Dark Night of the Soul by Saint John of the Cross. I'll leave a link to that as well. But thank you guys. I'll leave some of this conversation on the table, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you for hanging out with me. I don't have Scott's outro music, and so what I'll do is I'll just leave it here because there's a bit of a delay. I know I say this every time, but I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you guys, particularly you guys here that are here at the end. I hope you have a great week. Hit me up if there's anything I can pray for you about, and I will definitely catch you in the next one. I'll hang around and chat for a second, but yeah, I'll just leave it like, I don't know why I'm putting my headphones in. I'll leave it like screen no frame. Screen, oh, there it is. There.